Welcome to the Learning Blueprint, Crafting Behavioral Change and L&D. This is the go-to podcast for leaders who are passionate about driving impactful learning and development initiatives within their organizations. Each episode, we will dive into the strategies, tools, and insights that can help you sculpt the future of workplace learning. In this episode, we're going to explore role-based learning, its ineffectiveness, but also its effectiveness, why it could be used, and how do you make sure we're not just doing role-based, but we're incorporating the outcome-based in there as well. So let's get to it. Role-based learning is a popular thing that came about, 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, where we started to look at specific roles and then offer learning experiences for those roles. Typically, it's a great idea, right? It's this idea of adaptive learning, it's tailored learning, all good ideas. In practice, what we found is that people typically would, because it's such a vast project, right? If you have a whole organization and you're starting to dissect all the roles, what do they need, and then giving or creating learning experiences, there's a lot to it, so you got to take some shortcuts. And so what you typically see is that you identify the roles, you identify the things that that role does, and then what are the learning experiences that exist, and you map them to them, and then say what is not there, and then you create those. And so, not a problem, so long as you have also done the outcomes, right? So, when we do role-based learning, what we do is we first say, okay, for this role, what's the outcomes that you want your learner to be able to do in the whole role? And so we kind of get rid of the general rule of thumb of 3 to 6 outcomes when we're doing role-based. We look at it literally from the role. And so the role, depending on the complexity, might have 50 outcomes, right? That we want our learners to be able, or employees, to be able to do these things in that role, right? So it actually, often we work with HR and supervisors when we're developing those outcomes, but you still want to do those outcomes when you're trying to figure out role-based learning. So a couple things to talk about as a caution for you if you're in the role-based learning. It's not a problem in and of itself, but if you do it without outcomes, it ends up being really messy. It ends up not changing behaviors because you haven't done outcomes. And you end up just providing a lot of mapping to the learning experience. So it looks better. It feels more relatable, but still not getting any behavior changes.
Looking to bring a real change to your team's learning and development? Then you need Legacy Learning Consulting. We're all about creating custom learning strategies that truly make a difference. Whether you're aiming to boost team performance or enhance leadership skills, we've got you covered. Dive into what we offer by visiting legacylearningconsultingllc.com. Start crafting your team's legacy in learning with us today. That's legacylearningconsultingllc.com. We can't wait to work with you. Schedule a time to discuss with Jason in the episode description below.
So what we want to do when we're working with role-based is first identify them. So I always see it as a hierarchy, right? Think about all the roles that you want to develop a role-based learning program for. And then write those outcomes. So for each one, what does that look like? And then take a minute to ask yourself because what usually happens next is you map the existing learning experiences to those. Ask yourself if those learning experiences are outcome-based. And what I mean by that, if you've already kind of got them established and they, you didn't do outcomes when you created them, or somebody didn't do outcomes when they created them, the question you ask after you've established the outcomes for the role are, is this learning experience going to help them achieve that outcome? And if you have a lot of outcomes in your role-based outline that might be like identify, describe, likely the existing learning experiences are going to do that. What you're probably going to have also is more action-oriented outcomes, more analytical-oriented outcomes. And so for those, you're probably going to need to add learning experiences outside of your typical live training session or e-learning, because usually those components aren't in there. And those could be in the form of, hey, go practice this thing, and reflect on it in this way. And I think if you can do that, that adds a lot more meaning to the role-based learning experiences. You're going to see those results, not just provide the right content to the right people, right? The role-based, I like to talk about this role-based, and it's important because it sounds like a good strategy, and it is, but not if you don't do the outcome-based approach. It's going to be a lot of effort, a lot of activity that you do as a learning professional that gets you no results. It will create more motivation. People will be more motivated because the content's only relevant to them and they're not taking stuff they don't need. It will be a better feel and more structure, but it isn't going to change behaviors if you don't do this outcome-based approach. So when doing the rule-based, you're still going to start with your outcomes, or you're starting with the rules, which is a slight difference between any of these other ways of approaching. You're going to start with the rules, just identify the different rules, then outcome those rules, each rule, then map. So again, the mapping is what's the content that we have that exists for those outcomes. What are the current learning experiences? And then create the learning experiences that are missing, rather than just taking what exists and plopping it in there. So rule-based isn't a problem. It's a good strategy to use, so long as you're also thinking about the outcome and the outcomes associated with those learning experiences. Thank you for tuning in to the Learning Blueprint, Crafting Behavioral Change in L&D. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, and follow us on your preferred social media channels to continue the conversation and stay up to date on the latest trends, strategies, and success stories in L&D. Join us next time as we further explore the world of learning and development. Until then, keep forging pathways to meaningful behavioral change in your workplace. And don't hesitate to reach out via social media with your thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like to see us cover. Here's to shaping the future of your organization, one behavior at a time.